Oh, goodness, it already started. Well, for anyone watching after the fact, howdy, howdy, howdy. I'm just doing some technical stuff because I haven't done this in 6 months like a doofus. So, checking making sure my audio is working. All right, sweet, it's working. So, maybe some people will trickle in here as I wait. But, I guess I'll go ahead. Welcome. Maybe I should have just done that at the beginning, then said all the technical stuff. But welcome to Blind Eye Live. Blind Eye's back, baby. And this time I am here to stay. I will not abandon you during the greatest college football season of my life. I don't care what anyone says. People could complain. And yes, I will get into another day. I might get into it this show. Who knows? Depending on how quickly I get through my topics. But yes, the officiating was terrible this year, but the greatest college football season of all time. And I talked up, man, I was ready for football season, and then life happened. And I just could not stream. Couldn't do it. And so I'm back now, and I am prepped. I am in draft prep right now. I am ahead of where I was last year at this time in terms of prospect evals. I have gone through every quarterback that I believe is worthy of an actual evaluation. So that's going to be something I'm going to be getting into probably starting this week. I did put that at the beginning, but I'm just going to do kind of an overview of stuff. NFL offseason is coming up, but fast approaching. Actually, I believe tomorrow is February. Yes, tomorrow is February 22nd, and that is when franchise tags. The franchise tag window opens. So those decisions have to be made, I believe, between February 22nd and March 3rd. Sorry, I'm diving real quick in here. Kind of messed up my intro, but Blind Eye Live is back, and hopefully we're going to have some updated graphics, like actual graphics, and maybe I'll even learn how to implement them properly too. So that's coming. Blind Eye Live 2.0 is going to be lit. I might even have a real microphone. Won't that be something? With that being said, I miss doing this. Because I like talking ideas, and I'm kind of hoping in the future my format's going to change. I'm really hoping once I go into 2.0 mode, I'm hoping I'll be able to have maybe some guests on, some friends. Not going to make any promises because who knows what's going to happen, or if people will want to jump in and help me out. Although I do have one person interested, but I got to figure out how to do that. Because I'm an idiot when it comes to all this tech stuff. Like, I play video games. There's certain things on the computer I can do. I can work Microsoft Excel. But all of this, probably because of the whole, like, half or more than half blind now. I'm not sure how to describe the size of my blind spot. It's not half of my visual field, but it's a lot of the most important part of it. So, And I'm not going to get into trying to explain, like, well, then how do you watch football? Why should I care about your opinion about football? Why did I turn into sour boy all of a sudden? But yeah, why should you care? I sit here. So right now, this is about how close I get to my monitor. Now, when I'm watching, I might lean back a little bit, but I have to get pretty close. But I watch things multiple times, and I do my due diligence. I've been watching for a long time, and to a certain degree, I'm also not too proud to say that I listen to other people who are intelligent and have been doing things longer than I have, or who have proven that even if they've been doing it as long or less time, when people are right, they're right. And when people have an interesting perspective that, gets the gears turning, it's like, I didn't think about things that way. I might not fully agree, but getting other perspectives is good. Sharpening yourself against other people's opinions and having conversations with people who disagree with you, it is important. Now, as an evaluator, you've got to sharpen your skills, and you've got to figure out to a certain degree, you got to figure out what you value as well. Because different evaluators value different things value things differently than each other. Some guys care a lot about production, and a lot of people are what you see is what you get. That's not always great, but it also depends on where the guy is. I mean, if a guy is not able to hack it, or should I say, if it took a guy transferring from a big school to a small school to start and look good, he might not be ready for big time. And now that guy might have improved, but a 1,200-yard receiving season with 9 touchdowns at Alabama is a lot more impressive than, a 1,500-yard, 13, 14, 15 touchdown season at Western Kentucky. And that's not a diss at Western Kentucky. And I'll say, Bailey Zappi, or Zapp, the numbers he put up this season are ridiculous. But just because you had a few more yards or touchdowns, or, we're in the same stratosphere in yards and touchdowns as Joe Burrow. Yes, Joe Burrow was playing better talent, but he was playing it just so much harder schedule. I watched Bailey Zapp throw an interception against UT Martin this year. For reference, I grew up not maybe an hour from Martin. They're a D3 school. Not that a D3 school can't have good players, but if you saw the throw, you'd be like, why'd you do that? So, anyway, I'm going into this because I'm about to get into NFL draft stuff, but for me, evaluating talent or evaluating different positions, different people worry about different things. Some people are very much, they get focused in on the tools, and they believe, hey, if we get the right coaching, the right development plan, we can mold this into something that it isn't right now. And all these players are still moldable. Very few players are a finished product. Because if they are a finished product, they're probably going to fail once they get to the next level. Once they get to the NFL level. That's just how it is. You're not going to step in day one and be the best at your position. And if you are, holy crap. That's a rare, what Justin Jefferson did as a rookie is rare. Rarely are guys that, just that freaking awesome out the gate. The crazy thing is Justin Jefferson was better this year as a player. He was a better player. But he was given a lot more attention this year. Teams really focused on him more this year. And yet Jefferson was still insanely good. And then there's also A.J. Brown's been outstanding so far when he's been healthy and when Ryan Tannehill hasn't been. Well, when Ryan Tannehill wasn't trash, which was, his first 2 years in Tennessee, and then this year Ryan Tannehill turned into a pumpkin. The Texans loss that Tennessee had, and the Bengals game, and people could say, well, 2 of the interceptions were tips or whatever, all 3 of Tannehill's interceptions in that game were just bad decisions. One of them was just, I'm just going to quick throw the screen without paying attention, like not even think about looking to see if anyone's like jumped in the way there. Like Tannehill just just literally tossed the ball straight to a Bengals player. But the other 2, it's like, those were bad decisions to begin with. Those were bad throws. I mean, the only way you allow someone to overcome being sacked 9 times and throwing a maybe shouldn't have been a pick is to do what Tannehill did, which was literally hand the game away. And that last interception, it's a tie game. At worst, you're going to overtime. Why force a throw? Why force that throw? And then he gave the Bengals the opportunity to put the ball in the hands of Joe Burrow to get them within field goal range of the best rookie kicker, I think, in the history of the league. Evan McPherson's ridiculous. Then again, I thought he was awesome in college. He was my number 1 kicker in this last year's draft, so there's that. So with that being said, I'm getting off into the weeds and ranting, but, A.J. Brown came out outstanding, got better in year 2, and unfortunately this year dealt with some injuries. Chipotle apparently trying to kill him with a burrito. I just don't trust Chipotle. Free Bird's where it's at. And then you look at Deebo Samuel, who Deebo's been really good. Deebo was outstanding this year. Man, there's so many awesome, talented young wideouts right now. And that number's just going to grow. It seems like every single draft, we're going to have like a draft class that's got like 5 receivers who are worthy of like first round consideration. Like, what is this? And most of them are living up to the hype. That's the other crazy part about it. Like, the only bust receiver of the last should I say first round drafted receivers who have been a bust of the last 2 classes is Jalen Reagor. I don't care what people say about Ayuk. Ayuk has dealt with some injuries, but when he's been healthy, Ayuk's been really good. Ayuk's legit. And if you go back to the 2019 class, Deebo was I thought he could go in the late first round. A.J. Brown was my top receiver. I thought Marquise Brown had first round speed. I was just worried about his body and staying healthy, and that's been a decent concern. And then DK Metcalf, I was just like, I don't care about the agility drill stuff. Like, the dude's a monster. Like, he's 6'3". He's shredded I'm pretty sure DK Metcalf could take Hercules in a fight. And the dude ran was it a 4.31 at 6'3", 227? Or was it a 4.29? I think it was a 4.31 or 4.33. I mean, it was still ridiculous. He's stupid fast for a guy that hulking big. And had an awesome vertical. He had first round talent. People were worried about his neck. That was definitely a concern, and so far that really hasn't been in the league. So I thought that receiver class was really underrated. Huh. And going into 2020, I had Justin Jefferson as my top-rated receiver. Not CeeDee Lamb, not Jerry Jeudy, not Henry Ruggs, not Jalen Reagor, and not Brandon Ayuk. Although I like Ayuk a lot. I love the top of that draft, the 2020 class. There's so many really, really, man, that receiver class was deep. But I absolutely loved Justin Jefferson. And everybody thought he was going to athletically be like a step below all those guys, and he wasn't. He ran. I'm trying to remember the 40 times off the top of my head because I believe it was like Jerry Jeudy, I think, ran a 4.45. And I think it was Jefferson who ran the 4.43. CeeDee Lamb, of course, had the 4.5. And then Ruggs, of course, ran, what was it? Like low 4.3s, high 4.2s. It's like somewhere around 4.3. Was it a 4.28? It was somewhere between a 4.28 and a 4.32. Sue me for not remembering exactly. And then Ayuk had like a 4.6 40, but he plays faster on tape. And his agility, quick twitch, whatever. And of course, Reagor was hyped to be like as fast as Henry Ruggs, and I think he ran like, people were talking like, this guy, we're sure he's going to run low 4.3s. He could run in the 4.2s. I think he ran like a 4.47. I think maybe there was an injury issue or something, but, he did show good explosion, but he wasn't as athletically explosive as some people thought. And I didn't have a first-round grade on Jalen Reagor. There were multiple receivers taken in the second round that I had better grades than Jalen Reagor on. I'd need to go back and look through my stuff from 2020. And I'm not going to do that right now. But, and we all have our hits and misses on different things, like getting back to, the evaluation process. There's so many things that go into evaluating players and evaluating talents as they're making that jump from college to pro. And as well from high school to pro. Like, just because a guy has all the tools necessary doesn't mean that he learns how to put them to use. Because if anything, like Jadeveon Clowney is one of those stories. Part of it's because he's been injured. And sure, that took some of his explosion, maybe some of his agility, but like his explosiveness has pretty much stayed. But he never really learned how to. He's never really learned pass rush moves. He doesn't have a repertoire. His physical skills were incredible, but he never. Sorry, that was. Thought I heard something weird. I think a wind just started blowing. Anyway, sorry. But some guys just don't learn how to use those tools. Dorial Green-Beckham's another great example. Now, part of his was also off the field, just making stupid decisions, and not caring either, like not caring enough. But Dorial Green-Beckham was like, I believe, the number one recruit in his recruiting class. Went to Oklahoma, flamed out there because of off the field stuff. Goes to Missouri, puts up has some dominant tape, and then some tape where it's like, you just decide, this play doesn't matter. And then once again, there's off-field concerns. Goes to the NFL. And, of course, my Tennessee Titans draft him in the second round. I'm like, man, this guy has great tools. But he's got the head of an idiot on his shoulders. And I think we traded him to the Eagles. Well, I'm trying to remember. Did he get drafted by the Eagles and we traded for him? See, this is how little... By the way, this is what his career is. I can't remember off the top of my head which team he played for first. Because I want to say he was drafted in the second round. I believe he was traded for like a 5th or a 6th round pick. I think after his first year. If not, it was his second, but I believe it was like after his first season in the league. And this guy had Calvin Johnson level tools. Just simply put, I mean, dude's 6'5", like 220, 225. He ran in the 4.4s. Had an impressive vertical leap, like huge catch radius, like, and could just physically dominate at the catch point, releasing off the line of scrimmage when he was engaged. The problem is he never engaged long enough or hard enough, and never engaged in the practice process, in the getting better process to become what he could be. And I think what you're seeing out of a lot of these top prospects who, and I think some of it comes from like what school you go to, and what coaches you're under. Because a lot of times, if you're around other maniacal workers and you get that bug too, and you're under coaches who they eat football, sleep football, breathe football, speak football, live football. It causes you to have to reach another level, or else you're not going to even get a shot. That's why Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, and Devontae Smith all went in the first round. All were top 15 picks. Like, it's because the other guys were so talented and worked so hard that if you didn't get a shot. And that's the issue. Well, and I guess I'll get into this. I'll use this as an example because this is a great way to put this in there. Nick Saban was just speaking at, I think it was this weekend, spoke at a high school coaches conference, State of Alabama, like high school coaches association. They do this every year, and he speaks every year. And while yes, and this is recorded, but he's really candid at these conference, and you really get some really cool stuff from the mouth of Saban, like real wisdom, like things you can really dig into and learn a lot from. And he used an example about this season. Coming into the year, in 2 drafts, you lost 4 first-round receivers. And you also come into the year, like, you have this really studly tight end in Jaleel Billingsley as, like, a weapon downfield tight end. You have, I believe Latu was a transfer, or at least was just now really getting to get a lot of playing time. Miller Forrestall had left, but you have this opportunity for Billingsley, like, here's a chance for him to step up. Well, he starts off the year in the doghouse because he didn't, I guess he thought and there were some issues, like, coming into Bama. Like, there was a reason, like, talent-wise, freshman year, he should have seen the field. And probably would have, but there was a lot of talk about, like, some of his issues. Sophomore year, he has that breakout down the stretch, or the 2020 season, and I thought he was going to have a huge year this year. I thought he was going to really break out with Bryce Young and these opened up targets with only John Mechie and Slade Bolden coming back. And Bolden's a possession guy. Bolden's a solid, he's a solid kind of receiver like that, but I don't see a whole lot of upside with Bolden. Now, it also depends, look at what Hunter Renfrow has become at the NFL level. Bolden could be one of those guys. But Renfrow was better in college than Slade Bolden, so there's that too. But there were these targets, and yes, Jamison Williams transferred in. And he was incredible, as advertised, maybe even better. Transfer from Ohio State. And think about Ohio State's receiving corps this year. They're going to have 2 guys who are going to go in the first round. And they've got another receiver who isn't eligible to go this year, who, if he was, would be a first rounder too. And Jamison Williams, arguably, better than all 3 of those guys. Before the ACL tear, he was the highest rated receiver with most of the draft experts that I really care about their rankings. Or at the very least, this guy was a top 10 caliber guy, top 15 caliber talent for most of them. So, and he was jockeying for that number 1 spot. But even with that, you've got Williams, you got Mechie, you got Bolden. Bolden's a guy that, if you're dynamic, you can beat out. And because Billingsley started off the season in the doghouse, obviously Christian Latu got to really show out. And I think he could have gone into the NFL draft this year if he wanted to. He decided to stay. I'm excited for him. I think he's going to be a really good pro. I don't know if he's going to be amazing, but he's a plus blocker, and he's a really good receiver who has more after the catch juice than most guys his size. Really, really like him. And it probably was smart of him to kind of sit out, because this year's tight end class is loaded. Billingsley and Latu not in it. Billingsley just decided to come back to college because his stock tanked a bit. He's going to Texas to Sark, and Sark used him really well, so we'll see what happens there. Getting back to my point, because I got off of it. So Saban's talking about this season that in the national championship game, they had 3 guys that Saban didn't name these guys, but he said there are 3 players who had opportunities to change the game, and they didn't capitalize on them. They didn't take advantage of their opportunity, because John Mechie tears his ACL in the SEC championship game on a touchdown catch. I believe it was on the touchdown catch. And so he's out going into the playoff. So Williams becomes the focal point of their passing game. Although Cincinnati, with their secondary, their defense did a really good job of pressuring Young and covering their receivers. Williams still had a pretty good game. But he changed, and he kind of turned more into Mechie's possession type as a really high-end possession type receiver. Mechie, another thing that Mechie also brings to the table is he is one of the best blocking receivers I've ever seen. That guy is going to improve your offense on plays where he's not running routes, and when it comes to his skill set compared to other receivers. If you can add value as a receiver, as a blocker, on top of being good at the normal or the more valuable receiver parts of the game, that's important. And to some teams more than others. Any teams that are running a lot of play action stuff or a lot of these zone offense based teams, people running the Shanahan or from the Shanahan tree, Mechie is extremely valuable to them. like a guy who can dominate uh, corners on the edge that way, and then play physically in the route tree and play intermediate. Like, really key guy. And he was obviously key to what Alabama does. So he's out. And Bolton's not dynamic enough, even like Mechie's not as dynamic as Williams, but he's a better receiver than people give him credit for too. And it showed last year, or in 2020, when Jalen Waddle was hurt, Mechie really popped. And Mechie had a good season this year. He was overshadowed by Williams, but Mechie had a really statistically great season for a number 2 receiver in his offense. But there were other guys who, coming into the year, Bama had a really great receiving recruiting class. And they had some other guys from like the previous year, or at least one guy from the previous year. And these guys, they, as Saban put it, or to paraphrase what Saban's point was in between here was, he said 3 guys had an opportunity to make it or to make plays. And these weren't all receivers. Like, he didn't say the positions, but I know one of these guys in particular, because I saw him drop at least one ball that hit him in the hands and he dropped. The other one I think he could have caught and he didn't. Can't remember if it hit him in the hands, but there were 2 big plays where Bryce Young, and there were a few more because there were more, but there was one guy in particular. It's like, you hit this guy twice. They're perfect throws, and he doesn't make the play. And one of them was just inexplicable in the national title game. And, it's like, well, he hadn't played all year. Like, that was a huge moment. It's like, yeah, but if you were, as Saban put it, or to paraphrase what Saban said, the moment was too big, or the moment was big, but it was too big because they didn't treat practice like every practice rep was a big moment. Because if you don't practice, like if every practice rep isn't the most important practice rep of your life, if you're not worried about showing the coaches that you can do the best possible job of executing your role consistently in practice, they're not going to throw you on the field. It doesn't matter if you get it right sometimes. It's not about whether you can do it right. It's about how often you do it right and how often you do it wrong. Are you consistently on point? Like, there was a rivalry between Alabama's elite receivers the last from 2017 to 2020. And it made those guys better. Because they'd sometimes harp on it. You could see it. Like, they trash talk each other, on the sidelines. They were maniacal competitors. And they knew that aggressively attacking every rep in practice and games was going to make them better. And they knew that getting at each other a little bit, friendly competition, because competition can be friendly. Trying to be better than your friend doesn't mean that you're a bad friend. I hear all these people not everything needs to be competitive. Not everything needs to be a competition. It's like, in some ways that's right. Not everything needs to be an unhealthy competition. Not everything's like a zero sum, like, you have to lose. Like, I have to win and you have to lose. You can win without someone else, especially when you're on the same team. The whole goal is for the team to win. If I'm winning my matchups, if I'm winning my reps, we're winning. If my buddy is winning his reps, the team's winning. Now, we might have some competition about seeing who wins more reps. We want to maybe be higher than him on in the pecking order. But there's a healthy way to go about that. And those guys did. and did so at an elite level. Like, jeez. Because that's 2 top 10 picks and 2 guys who are outside the top 10, which the crazy thing is, like, I had thought Devontae Smith was the best of the bunch the whole time. I thought he was better than Jerry Jeudy. But Waddle was the one that was drafted the highest because he was the fastest and most agile. Like, Waddle, in a lot of ways, because none of these guys are, like, super tall. Like, I'm pretty sure they're all 6 foot or under. Like, Devontae might be 6'1". Jeudy might be 6'1", but I think he's 6 foot. Ruggs was 5'11", and I believe Waddle's also 5'10", 5'11". So none of these guys are super tall or long. Smith's kind of long for his height. But these guys, they cared about every practice rep. And what Saban was saying was these guys didn't attack every practice rep. They were more worried about playing time. But here's the thing. What's more important? It doesn't matter if you're getting playing time if you're not doing the job right. And if you're only attempting to do the job right or putting in the effort when you're getting playing time or when you're in the game, you're not going to be prepared. If you practice sloppy and you don't take it seriously, like, it's not just a switch you can flip, because you will learn bad habits. You have to be locked in. To be great, to be the best you can be, you've got to lock in every time. Like, and Saban's, and I believe Saban's right, but that's what he's saying. He's like, the reason those plays weren't made by those players, those 3 unnamed players, was because they didn't take practice seriously. And you've got to do, it's like that's what you've got to do on a base level. Hey, it's David. What's up, bro? It's good to be back. Sorry, I was really locked in. My setup, it's hard for me to, like, I have to look all the way over here to see chat. But thanks, man. Appreciate you tuning in. Give me a viewer. But yeah, so like I was saying, Saban gave us that nice little tidbit to summarize. Work hard at everything you do. Work hard before it matters. Because if you're not working for that moment, when the moment does get there, you're not going to be ready for it. You're not going to be ready for it. Like, and I'll put that into my own life. Like, I can give my own personal example, because some people, like, you know, that's great hearing from others, but, you know, what do you got? When I was at the School for the Blind and I was doing my orientation mobility training, you know, I walked all over Austin, Texas, under a blindfold with a cane, because eventually, you know, I'm going to get to a point where I have to really rely on that cane. Because when I go out, I tend to have my cane with me when I go out. Because it's a good. That's easier for people to say, oh, he's got the cane, or, oh, I know what that cane means. If this guy asks me a question, it's like, yeah, he needs help. When some dude, you know, who looks just like me walks up and, like, he's moving, it's like, yeah, his eyes are acting kind of weird, but, or see him kind of glazed or half glazed over, maybe, or his pupils are a little more dilated than normal. Maybe this guy's on drugs, you know, asking me a question. I don't know if I was. So the cane's nice, because especially for those of us or a lot of people on the middle ground. Although that gets kind of weird, to get off on a little tangent. It's kind of weird being in this middle ground, because it's like, well, you can do this. What about, why can't this, or whatever? It's complicated. And it's really awkward, because, like, when when I have the cane, I almost feel obligated to act blinder than I am, because I don't want. And this might sound weird, but this has happened to me. It's like, someone sees it, it's like, hey, why do you got the cane? Like, you're obviously not totally, like, you're not blind. I saw you using your phone. I'm like, yeah, I'm nearly eating my phone to read it so that, because I don't have my headphones with me because I left them at home. And I don't want everybody in the world to hear, like, what cringy thing one of my friends sent in our group message, or I don't want to accidentally read all when I'm, like, trying to check Twitter and some random recommended thing from some crazy person is in my feed. Like, I don't I don't want that. So anyway, I'm at the School for the Blind and I'm doing orientation mobility. Well, we start off in the building. And I have to learn technique, and I have to learn, kind of the basics. Learn how to get up and down stairs, like proper technique. I found there actually are multiple techniques, but there's one that's like just I don't understand why anyone would use anyone or another method than that. But you learn these things, and I was picking things up really quick. I started doing some stuff outside around the building, like by the end of the week. I mean, during the first week, one of our counselors, like our like licensed counselors, they was walking past while I was running, or I was kind of navigating my way around the building for something my instructor had me doing, and she asked, hey, I'm not gonna use his name, but hey, well, who you working with today? And my instructor goes, oh, this is Hunter, one of our new guys. She's like, oh yeah, I met him earlier this week. It's like she said, and she goes, Hunter, your technique, or your tempo and technique with the cane sounds perfect. And I was like, well, that's cool, because I'd only been doing this for a few days, but I chalked it up and immediately. It's not that I'm awesome. It's like I'm a drummer. It's like metronoming with a stick. It's kind of natural, right? But we get out, and there's this process though, because I first get out, and it's my first time crossing a street. It's not a super busy one, really, but I mean this is Austin, and there is a lot of like noise around because we're actually right next to, or we're right on like North Lamar, or really close to it. Like it runs right past the school. That's a busy street. That's one of the main thoroughfares in Austin. And so I'm like, oh goodness, like, but my instructor's there, so like eventually I get over it, and I have a few troubles like keeping like a straight and not kind of like veering off or whatever, because you'll find like you have to really practice to get your rhythm right and not get into a spot where like you're not swinging your cane far enough left, so you're more right heavy, so you end up actually kind of veering right. And sometimes you can get like to where you're leaning too much, or like if your posture's off, it can cause things. And you could sometimes gear into sounds accidentally and start veering towards sounds. And if there's any kind of slope at all that you're on, sometimes even that, because you might short with your cane hitting it or whatever, but it's so, but maybe you think it's your own issue, or like you changed your motion slightly, or just it could be so subtle that the first one it's not really anything, but you do that a few times and now like you've actually kind of angled yourself because you're kind of trying to stay in the middle of that cane motion too. So it's hard to explain this. So I'm doing great, and I'm rocketing through, and we get through to the end of the second week, and I had my first dead drop. I think it was second week. It might have been the third, but I think it was the end of the second week. And we'd been working in a neighborhood a little ways from the center. But it's a nice, like, quiet neighborhood. And he drops me off somewhere I don't think I'd exactly been yet. But I start immediately freaking out. And now remember, I'm under blindfold. So I got this doofy blindfold. I don't think I have one like within reach of me right now. So I got this, big black or like, and when I say blindfold, it's not like something I'm wrapped. It's like, it's almost like goggles, but they don't have lenses, and it's like padded, or they've got like foam, whatever, which those things get hot in the summer. Golly, Bill. But we get here or I start going, and I start kind of freaking out. Even though I'm on a sidewalk, I'm safe. I'm like, but my goal is I've got to find the bus stop that I use, or I've got to find that bus stop so I can get back to the center for lunch. So I don't know, because I'm an idiot. I shouldn't say I'm an idiot. It's not like he told me, but he's watching. He's around. And so on a couple occasions, because I'm letting fear take over here, I peek. And so I get to, where I'm supposed to be going, and I hear Joe. And Joe goes, "Get in the van." And I could tell he's not happy. And my first instinct is, ooh, he knows. But at the same time, like, so I get in the van. We start talking. He's like, "So how'd you get here?" I said, "Well, I peeked. I cheated." And he's like, "Well, what?" He said, "Why?" "Well, I didn't know where I was going, and I was afraid." He's like, "Understandable." He said, "Why didn't you just make a decision and go?" I said, "Well, because I didn't want to make the wrong decision. It's like I needed." He said, "Oh, I'm trying to accomplish a task, and, da da da." I can't remember exactly what it was. And he goes, "Hunter, it doesn't matter if you get it doesn't matter if you get to the finish line if you don't do it right." He said, "Because you didn't accomplish anything. You didn't accomplish your goal. If your goal is is independence of movement, if your ability is to have freedom if things, or in the future, if your vision takes every single turn for the worst that it possibly can, how are you going to do that if you rely on your vision when you're scared? Because it doesn't matter if you made it to the bus stop, because you didn't do it the way that you set out to. And he was right. What's the point? And so he asked me, he's like, "Are you serious about doing this? Are you serious about orientation ability?" Because he said, and he said, because we can do a visual version of this where, you're using the cane, but we're doing things with you with your eyes that you can use, and, as long as, you have them. And I said, "No, that's not what I want." And from that day forward, because I want to say that was a Thursday, so we kind of chilled out Friday and did something more chill. Because like, I will say like, but by the time I had chosen to cheat, it wasn't like I started off that way. I was freaking out. Like, and he wasn't being. And I've told this story to some people, and it's like, well, and like I said, I'm trying to remember. I can't remember word for word what he said. I do remember the ideas though. Like the ideas I'm conveying, exactly the same. He was like straightforward and a little brutal, but that's what I needed. Like I needed someone to confront me with the reality. It is, if you're going to do this, you've got to commit. You've got to commit and you've got to do things right. You've got to go through the process, because you're never going to actually achieve your actual goal if you don't commit to every step, to every facet of this training. You're not going to be able to get around without your cane or without your sight if you don't ever do it. He said, and because he put up, he's like, you can wait and do this when you have to, or if you have to in the future. But, that's not what I wanted. And I told him, that's not what I wanted. What I want. I said, I don't want to cheat. But I let fear win. And from that day forward, I promised to myself I wasn't going to let fear win. And so another thing I started doing was I prayed directly before going out every time. Because, pray when I get up in the morning. But, I specifically prayed over my session every time. That was one thing that I think was a big help, too. But getting, just realizing it's like, you know what? This is going to be hard. This is going to be maybe a little bit scary. But I've just got to do it. And the next time I did a dead drop, because there were some times like where I knew exactly where I was getting off. Like I did some things where like he'd send me on like assignment in the neighborhood, where exactly getting off the bus where, at that bus stop and like going down the parts of the neighborhood like I knew like or that I'd already been down several times and kind of, I don't want to say know like the back of my hand, but And then I guess it was like a week and a half, or maybe it had been 2 weeks, but I think it might have been a week and a half. Do another dead drop. Doesn't drop me in the same place either. Well, actually, I think there might have been one in the middle of that. I'm trying. This has been like 5.5 years ago now. Actually, coming up on 6 years ago, which that's also crazy. This has turned into story time with Blind Eye. How about that? So we get, or I get dropped off, and it was actually pretty cool that morning. Like really comfortable. I think I got dropped off like in a very tree-heavy area, like near a park. I end up off in the grass for a bit. Things get crazy, and then my cane tip breaks. So, actually, let me go snag it because it's right over here. So I have this cane here, and this is 63 inches long. I think I was already using this one. Yeah. So, as you see on the bottom, there's this metal. Let me make sure I've got it in like focus. There's this metal tip that's over some like rubber. I don't use this much anymore because it's a straight cane, doesn't fold down. If I was totally blind, I probably would use one of these, even though there's other things that make some other types, like the one that I usually use, which is collapsible and is like, I think 58 or 59 inches. Like it's a few inches shorter, which means I don't get quite as much reach out of it as I do this. But, I got over 5 feet, or I've got like 5 feet of reach on top of like, my arm length at whatever angle. And anyway, so the cane tip, because I'm using this a decent amount, like it, I guess the metal had worn down on one of the edges, and it just, so I've got a rubber tip now on the end, and while that doesn't sound like a terrible thing, the reason for that metal gives you much more contact. One, it doesn't stick to things, like it's not grabby, and it gives you really good like feedback, like texture feedback. And that plus the rubber, because the rubber gives it a little bit of shock absorption too, to a degree. But that combination, it's really nice. When you've only got that rubber, it sticks on things, and it makes telling surfaces apart harder. Not impossible, but it's drastically different, and it really affects you. And so this happened early. Like, I think I'd maybe been walking for about 15 minutes. Maybe. And my sessions are like 2 hours. From the start, like it was my 10 to 12, I think, something like that, or maybe it was like, yeah, it was like 10 to 12. So anyway, I'm barely into this thing. Maybe it had been 20 minutes, maybe. And I'm now, once again, I'm blind because blindfold. But that cane gives you some sight, because once again, like, you've got tactile feedback from that. And then you're also using audio, like you're hearing things around you. That cane hitting, when you really tune in, like, you've seen like some stuff, like probably of like people using echolocation. I'm actually sure there's some people who probably are doing that. I wouldn't say I'm that good, but I know people who would like slap their cane down, and they could who were like totally blind, who could like map out hallways. Like they could just start pointing at doors. And then like I got to a point where like I could feel when I was walking past doorways. Like not only could I kind of feel the air movement, but like I could kind of hear it. I knew people. One of my instructors, one of the other people there, great lady, former college basketball ref actually, women's and men's. She could she could send some crazy stuff. Like as our instructor put it, he said, she could tell you if there's a gnat on the ceiling. Like, kind of, she was crazy. But, so now I'm blind, and now I'm kind of, you could say like the cane, you're feeling around the dark, but it's like, I'd gotten used to it. It's like, man, I'm getting a lot of information, okay. And now, boom. Imagine like that information was taken down even more. It's like, you know what it's like walking around out in the dark of night? There's some light, but it's definitely less. And then like maybe you go out in the woods and or like into a kind of like treed area and it's really dark. And then you walk into a shed or like a building with no light on. I'm almost at that point. Like I'm in like the forest where it's like, man, there's not a lot of light. I can barely see like past the tree directly in front of me. And so we're so I'm moseying along, and I'm like, I'm not hearing any people to ask like maybe where I'm at. So as he or my instructor talked to me, he said, you do have your phone. It's a great piece of technology. You can find out where you're at. He said, sometimes depending on where you are though, it'll tell you one thing. It's like you're actually not on that street. You're on the street next to it, but the closest address to you might be on the other street. So, or if you're at a corner, it might tell you whatever. Or if you're at an intersection, you could stand in the same spot and say like, hey Siri, where am I? And it'll tell you you're on one side of the street, and then you do it a second time and you're on the other. And I've run into that. But so, but he told me, first and foremost, try to use your environment and try to ask people. You need to get in the practice of using the people around you, because they are a better resource than anything else around you, and better than your phone. Because once again, GPS can be a little off, and also Siri and technology can misunderstand what you're trying to get, especially if you're using like the speech to, functions. So anyway, so I start kind of every so often. I'm like, hey, where am I? Because there was no one around. I couldn't hear anybody milling about. Which, this is a neighborhood, and it's the middle of, it's late morning. Most people are at work, what have you. So I start getting close, and finally I'm like, I know where I'm at now. Okay. And there was a period of time, like, man, I'm sitting here, I'm emotional, like, I'm feeling the fear, but I'm not touching my mask. Not once during this whole thing did I ever think, I gotta take this thing off. I'm like, nope, that's not an option. Today it is not an option. And I kind of I'm like, okay, I think I'm getting in a good direction. But man, it was a battle the whole time because of the cane. And I finally get, and I'll definitely say I took a couple wrong turns because I ended up somewhere that I definitely didn't take the most efficient route where I was going. And so, but I finally started hearing some noise, and I'm like, okay, so there's a major road, and I think I know this major road should take me right up. If I turn left here, I should be following it right to or to the street I need. That'll take me to the intersection that I need to get to. And I start going, but man, I'm having trouble because I couldn't keep my bearings really, and I'm tired, and it's also, now it's noon, and I'm out of like the neighborhood, and the sun's on me, I'm starting to sweat, I'm getting a little hot. I'm still kind of like, and I'm just exhausted because I have been pushing through fear for an hour and a half or so. And I finally end up at this, I'm pretty sure it was a restaurant. I still can't remember because I never went back. I actually never ended up back at this intersection corner. That's not super far away. And usually I was on the other side of the street anyway, like on the other side on the sidewalk when I'd been over here anyway. So I end up in this parking lot, and I'm like, I'm trying not to hit people's cars, but I'm like, I get stuck, and I'm like, and I'm like, and someone's like, or walking by, or I hear someone get out of their car, and I'm like, excuse me, I know I'm in a parking lot. Can you tell me what streets I'm at the corner of? And I'm like, and they tell me, and I'm just relieved because I'm right where I think I am. I'm like, thank you. Can you tell me how to get out of this parking lot so I can cross this street and take a left? they're like, they're like, yes, and they help me get past the cars to the thing. I cross the street, and I just start going. I'm like, I'm done. I'm over this, and I'm booking it. And then I do know, like, at one of these major, or, you know, as I'm coming up to this next intersection, like this one big one that's between, like, um, there and the bus stop, there's, like, this little grocery store. And the driveway on one side is just the worst. And because of the slope, you have to fight not to go down. Of course I do. And it's funny. So I end up across the street accidentally. And I'm at the corner and I'm like, wait a second. I should be. And I'm like, and I get a phone call. Because I'd actually already called my instructor and said, hey, I'm probably going to be a little late. And so just said, where are you? Well, actually, I think I called him or him after maybe I'd crossed the street or whatever. And then he calls me because he's like, he's actually in the area, of course. And he's pulled up and he's like, he calls me, he's like, hey, I see you. Just come across the street and there's some cars parked. I'm the third one. So I get in and he's like, you can take the mask off. Take the mask off. And he's like, and like, I've got this mixture of sweat and I'm just going to say it's all sweat. Totally all sweat. And he's like, so, how'd you do? And I said, well, and I'd already told him about the incident with the blowout on the cane, because that's what we called it. We called it when the tip broke, a blowout. He said, so, you going to remember to keep your extra cane tips with you? And I said, yes, sir. He said, you know, I've told you that from the beginning. I said, you're right. But I told him, I said, you know, I usually have my other backpack, and I took my lighter backpack today, and I forgot to change over and put my extra cane tip in there. He said, well, sounds like you need to get an extra cane tip and put in that bag too. And maybe in any bag that you take. And maybe put one on your desk in case you decide to go out without a bag at all. He's like, and I'm like, you're right. You told me that too. He said, I know. But what I didn't do was I didn't take the mask off. Despite this going, the thing's so light that my fan actually just eventually blew that sideways. That's the other upside to those canes over the my other cane, which is a collapsible one, which is heavier. It's got like aluminum. These are like made out pretty much almost entirely fiberglass. I think there's like a wood rod in it, but they're mostly fiberglass. These straight canes, and so it's like longer than the other, but it's so much lighter. So we're driving back, and he's like, so you did it today. Today was a success. I said, well, I didn't get to the bus stop. He said, yeah, but the process was a success. And you ran into difficulty, and you overcame it. Unexpected obstacles, and you handled it well. That's what you can build on. You can't build on cheating. You can't build on not going through the process. You can build on the process. So, and that's all you can ask.
Hunter, do you want to go get something to eat?
Sorry. That probably came across the mic. Who cares? So anyway, I where was I? So anyway, whole point, and that took forever, but you know what? This is my show, and I can talk about whatever I want, whenever I want. Well, as long as it's within YouTube's guidelines, which are vague and not at all unfairly and unequally applied to different people. YouTube's totally fair, would never do that. So, that being said, there is a process to things. And you've got to commit to the process. You've got to commit to the winning process, because if you don't, you are going to lose when it matters most. Because eventually, especially after that, I was never, for the next, like, however many months of training, I never once was in fear. Until my final, where I walked all the way to the Capitol building, and something unexpected happened. I had practiced this route in segments because I wanted to. And there were a couple places that were kind of in the area that I also wanted to go by, and I used it as an excuse. Which is also the cool thing about the training to some degree, like especially once you get further into it, or the late stages of it, like you can kind of practice your own lessons too. You can set goals of like, hey, I'm going to do this and go here, and I'll bring back proof that I made it. Because eventually, like, especially once you get confident in doing this stuff, usually they are watching you, but once you get to a certain point, they'll send you out and they trust you. They know you're capable. So I do my final, and walking down Guadalupe, or I'm down Guadalupe and I get to MLK, which is 19th Street in Austin. And this is like, I've just walked past University of Texas campus, and there's like construction going on all around down there at this point in time. And once you get south of MLK, a lot of the streets go to one way. There's only like 3 thoroughfares down. Like, you've got, of course, the interstate, but I think it's like Congress, Lamar, and maybe one other street are 2 ways through there. Everything else becomes a one-way street. So Guadalupe becomes a one-way street that is southbound. Yeah, I believe I'm right in saying it's southbound. So one of the things, and this intersection's weird, so you have to walk out to an island thing where there's like a cutout where you just turn right, or whatever, to merge onto the, MLK's east-westbound. So, and it's kind of a little wonky intersection, so like the islands are a little different. Because there's islands on the north side of the street, but because there's no northbound traffic, there's not an island on the there's an island only on one side of the southbound side. So one of the things that, like, when you're learning crossings that you do is you walk parallel, or you keep your traffic parallel with you that's closest to you. That way, one, you're not veering off into traffic, but it also keeps you going straight across the intersection. And some intersections might have some angle, so if you keep things parallel, you're going to hit, where you want to hit. So, and like I said, this weird intersection, it almost feels like it's a mound in some ways. Let's just say, I keep my traffic so parallel that all the parallel traffic to me decided to turn to the left, meaning they're going east. I pull a perfect turn with them. And I heard some people honking, and I'm like, what's going on? And I hit the sidewalk. I hit this so perfect that where like in a lot of cities you have like the little bumps at the end. Those are braille bumps for the blind to know that they're hitting a crossing. Some places you just have to hit a ridge, but like in Austin, like everywhere these things are there, as long as they're sidewalks, of course. Because like in that neighborhood I was talking about working, there was a sidewalk on one side of the street, but the other side of the street didn't have a sidewalk in a lot of places. Because I guess it was old. I don't know. So I hit the ramp for the sidewalk perfect. Like square. I'm like, man, I just nailed that crossing. So I'm walking and so I'd been here and I'm like, I know that I don't think it was that, or after a little bit I'd come to some steps and had to walk these steps down. And I crossed a couple streets. I'm like, or I had at least crossed one. And I'm like, I thought I ran into some steps by now. And I crossed another street. I'm like, something's not right. And as I get past the street, all of a sudden, the sun's on my face. Wait a second. It's October. Which, there's a reason why that's important. So, it's like, around 10 a.m.-ish, maybe? A little after. So the sun's still like rising, but also in the fall, the sun doesn't get as high in the sky. So, but anyway, so I'm like, wait a second. Why would the sun be hitting me from here? And then I'm like, I'm going east. And I'm supposed to be going south. Because like there's some buildings and stuff that are like just south of the school, and it like kind of blocked it out. And it had been kind of cloudy that morning anyway, which it cleared up by then. Which it was really nice. It was perfect weather to walk when I first got, and it still kind of was. But I mean, it was by the time it got to noon. By the time I got to my destination, I was sweating a bit because it had gotten a little warm. Or I'd sweat a bit because it was getting a little warm. Or at least being in the sun made it warmer. So, and actually, the picture, if you look at my icon for my channel, that picture is from that day. Me at the Capitol. So, cool little bit of channel trivia. So, I got some stranger to take my picture. Well, because I just wanted to, or I heard some people, I'm like, hey, I told them, like, hey, I'm in a school for the blind. I'm doing my final. I'm at the Capitol right now. Just to double check that I'm like, and I was like, and the Capitol building's like right there, right? And the guy's like, yeah, dude. And I'm like, could you take a picture of me? Like a couple of pictures? He's like, absolutely, bro. Takes my picture, or takes a couple pictures for me. And then he's like, I'm like, thanks, man. He's like, dude, congrats. It's like, dude, it's like, that's badass. I'm like, well, thanks, man. So, and I end up moseying my way, because I'm actually kind of, technically, I'm on the north, I'm trying to remember which side I was on. But anyway, I was kind of on the back side of like where the building faces. So I go around the other side and I sit down on a bench and I call my instructor. I'm like, yo, I'm here. He's like, sweet. He's like, what are you going to do? I said, for lunch. I said, I don't know, man. I might grab something and just chill out. I said, well, I think I might grab something. But I'm like, I think I have time to get back to the school. And I said, I really would like to get back and instead of just taking the whole day, like, do my afternoon classes at least. He's like, That's a wise idea. He said, that's smart. And so, because this was like, I think I finished I finished the last week of October. So this is like, I think the first week of October. Like, or one of the first few days of October. So, anyway, but getting back to it, because I got off track about, so I'm like facing east. I just crossed the street, so I'm like, I thought I heard some people, and I go, and so I kind of do this like looking around, like I'm confused, just whatever, and I go, hey, like, and I'm kind of like not yelling, but I'm like, hey, is there anybody like, is there any human beings around that can tell me where I'm at right now? Anyone? Or am I just a crazy person yelling into the ether? Sorry. Pull up my phone. Siri, where am I? You are at. Wait, let me make sure. You are at 202. Or you are at 200 East MLK. What? You are at 197 East MLK. Wait a second. You are at 200 East MLK. Or it might have been 202. Whatever. Yeah, it was like 198 and it was 200. Yeah. So, I'm like, man, I went a ways. Because, like, Guadalupe is like 2 blocks, I think I made it about 4 blocks. And so I'm like, man, how am I going to get back on my route? And then I'm like, wait a second, I don't need to get back on my route. Because I kind of had a little bit of a freak out for a second. I'm like, oh no, what do I do? I'm like, and eventually I'm like, hey, stupid. Remember, so one of the great things about Austin is its grid system. And it's very simple. It's great for blind people. There's some areas where things can be a little weird, but like, for the most part, really simple, especially down like the closer you get to the center of Austin. So I'm like, well, wait a second. I just need to go back 2 blocks and I'll be at Congress. Well, it's University north of MLK. It's Congress south. And then eventually it turns into Speedway way up north, towards the neighborhood that I'd been talking about, that working in earlier. Actually, Speedway goes right through it. So if I just go back and then hit that street, like cross the street, cross the next street I hit will be Congress. I could just go straight to the Capitol that way. But I didn't actually want to do that. So I get there, and then I'd not actually worked or been down any of these streets, so I didn't know the feel. So I'm kind of like, okay, I could take this. And I'm like, no, because there was a reason I did the way that I had before, was because there's a bus stop that was going to be the bus stop I would take back once I left the Capitol building. So I wanted to hit the state Capitol from that nearest entrance, so that I'd get up there and then I'd come back to that entrance. That way, I knew my path. I could just retrace my path back to the bus stop. So I start working my way down. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna stair step back over a couple blocks, or to the street that the bus stops on. So I cross, and then I'm like, I hear someone walking by. I'm like, hey, can I ask you a question real quick? Lady's like, yeah, sure. And I'm like kind of calmer now, but I think people could tell I'd been a little stressed, because I definitely was still in my voice. I'm like, hey, it's like, this is at a point where, like, I just crossed this. That's College Street, right? And they're like, yeah. And I can't remember the street name. And I'm like, so this is such and such street, right? And she takes a second. She goes, and I could tell, like, I could hear her, like, head move. So I'm like, she's looking for street signs. She's like, yes. I'm like, sweet. I know where I'm at. Back on track. Like, I did this kind of, like, celebratory, like, yes. And she goes, And she starts chuckling. I said, "I'm sorry. I'm doing like my mobility final, and this is huge." So I'm like, I got off track, and I actually walked her through. I said, I actually was supposed to like go straight, and I apparently screwed it up. I said, I don't know how I screwed this up, but I ended up going east, and I put it together later. And so I make my way and get there and everything. So that's my orientation mobility stories. I don't think I've said that on the stream. I might have once, but that's one of my favorites. But that's like getting, to tie that back into the whole process thing, like that Nick Saban's talking about. I would have screwed up there at my final, even though that was a real, like looking back, I'm like, man, that was a minor thing. And things didn't go according to plan, but I was able to put into practice the other things I had learned and my abilities to adapt and get back on track because I had gone through the process before. If I had never, if I'd never experienced any adversity, if I'd never failed or made mistakes before and overcome them before, probably don't there either. So, some wisdom from Saban this weekend. Man, already going like an hour and a half. Most of that was me talking about my time at the School for the Blind. So, with that being said, hopefully, the players mentioned by Saban, they learned their lesson. Because, and here's the thing, there were some people out saying that, Nick Saban's, a good coach wouldn't do that, or, that's not cool to do to the players. It's like, he didn't name names. And you might be able to figure them out, because I was able to figure out two of them for sure. I knew exactly one of them. The first thing I thought, I'm like, I know exactly who he's talking about. But he was talking about a couple receivers, because one of their young receivers had stepped up in the Cincinnati game, and he made a couple plays in this game, but I know one of them for sure was a receiver, and I think two of them might have been receivers. But, guys were given opportunities, and they didn't, run with them. And they might have all three been receivers, but I don't think that's the case either. Because they were also down their top three corners. And I know that in one of those, or that one of those players was one of those corners. So, you look at, or these people are, trying to criticize Saban and say whatever. It's like, no, what he did is good. He didn't say that those players were idiots. He didn't insult the players. He didn't say they didn't work hard. What he did say was based on obviously his own knowledge. Like, I mean, he's the coach. He's watching them every day. Their position coaches are watching them every day. They're hearing things. Don't believe that coaches don't hear. Sometimes when players complain, they don't think. And don't think for a second that there aren't players, there aren't leaders on the team that are absolutely telling the coaches, like, hey, this is going on. Or, hey, like, so-and-so's, disgruntled, or so-and-so's saying this. Like, it's like, not out of a tattletale mentality, not out of a I need to, or, like this guy needs to be punished, or how do I put this guy in line? It's like, hey, this is going on. We gotta address this for the team. Like, because this is an issue, or that stuff can be an issue, not just for the team, but for that player. That player, when his priorities aren't straight, he hurts himself. Like, when our priorities aren't straight, when we're not prioritizing the right things, like when we're not putting in the work to prepare us for the moment, we're hurting ourselves. we are setting ourselves up for failure. And any good teammate, any good brother isn't going to let you set yourself up for failure. Because he doesn't want to see you fail. Your teammates don't want to see you fail, or else they're not good teammates. Saban wasn't putting it out there to destroy those guys. He was putting that out there as a statement to coaches of like, hey, these are things that happen, or this is stuff you're going to run into. But that was also a statement because it's like he knows the cameras, or that they're cameras, there's audio, but he's speaking to his peers. Oh, as Saban sees it, his peers, like everybody else, like, these are high school coaches. Like, yeah, but they're coaches. Saban's among his people. Because, believe you me, Saban and every great coach, everybody who's good at anything, and we all do, we all have ego. There is a healthy level of ego. Because if you don't believe that you will succeed, that you don't believe that your process will succeed. Now, there's a difference between hubris and ego. Like, Saban has proven throughout his entire tenure coaching, especially at Alabama, and I think even at Miami, like, the Miami Dolphins didn't suck while he was there, but Nick Saban realized, I don't want to deal with the professional game. I don't like this. I don't like the professional game. Nick Saban didn't fail in the NFL. Some people say he failed. He wasn't a Joe Judge. Right now, his career winning percentage, I think, is higher than Zach Taylor's. And it might be as high as Kyle Shanahan's, or higher. So, which, once again, not putting them on the whatever, but Nick Saban's an elite level coach. Saban has adjusted his style. He's handed the offense over to more forward-thinking and more aggressive play callers. He's changed what his team looks for in quarterback. I mean, their offense is completely different. The defensive philosophy is still the same, really. He's still running a 3-4 defense. He's still recruiting the same types of guys. I mean, there's things that update definitely with the types of offenses he's running against. But Saban's approach is, I've got to keep grinding, I've got to keep working, and I've got to keep studying and learning. I've got to keep hiring the best people I can, because obviously if you keep hiring the best people, those guys are going to get hired by other people. Look at what Kirby Smart's done at Georgia now. Jimbo Fisher is a former assistant of Nick Saban. Lane Kiffin's a former assistant. Sark, like, you look at all these guys, and Sark was a head coach before being an assistant under Nick Saban. Like, he was successful at Washington. The USC thing was kind of, that didn't go super great, because of his own problems, but he straightened those out. And Saban, he learned a lot from Saban. Like, these are, like, you're looking at Lane Kiffin and Steve Sarkisian and Bill O'Brien, who is the offensive coordinator at Alabama right now. All of these guys were head coaches at the college level, and two of them at the pro level. Sark spent a year before going to Alabama as the offensive coordinator for Atlanta, or for the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, these are guys with college and pro experience. They went to Saban to learn. It wasn't just, and definitely to rebuild their stock, but they wanted to learn from his process. That was an opportunity. Saban's ego is, I want to be the best. And he puts in the work to earn the label of the best. And that's all. What he's saying is that's what he's asking of his players. Because what he's outlining, he's doing them a service. He's outlining for them and for other people, for coaches and players. Because don't think that driven high school players aren't listening to this too. Or that high school coaches aren't going to share this with their players who are going to hear this too. You got to prepare for the moment. And hopefully those guys will be the guys that 2 years from now or whatever, when they're lifting a championship trophy or are going to the NFL, you know, they're being interviewed and it's like, you know, and they're going to point to that moment of being like, I failed here because I didn't do this and I chose to do this. Or I chose to go all in and listen and prepare the way that I was being asked, or that I wasn't, or prepare in a way that I wasn't doing before, that I wasn't giving 100%. And now I'm here because I eventually listened. I learned my lesson. You know, I put some other stories in here, so I'll finish them up. That'll be the last, like, I guess, segments of the show. Guess I'm not going to get, well, I guess I can count that I did and more, because I talked about the whole School for the Blind stuff. So anyway, headline number one, which we're going to get into more NFL draft stuff eventually. I did talk about that. I think tomorrow's show, that's what I'm going to do. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the QBs, because I've done some tape work, a lot of tape work. But we're going to venture into the realm of college basketball for a bit, because I don't know if people have seen it. I'm not going to try and show it anywhere, because I'll get a community guideline strike from YouTube or something, or like happened to me last year when I was trying to show some, like, and I was giving commentary over some footage from the NFL Network, the NFL YouTube channel, of like some prospect pro days. Like, other outlets don't have footage to. Like, give me a break. I'm talking over and I'm doing something y'all aren't. I'm pausing, I'm doing whatever. It's so stupid. Anyway, Juwan Howard got a little upset with Coach Garb, or Garby, or whatever. Coach Garb, Garb. Let's just say Coach Garb at Wisconsin. So it's 75-61 or something like that, or late. I think the final score was like 77-63, but it was like towards the end of the game. There's not a whole lot of time left, and the game's at hand. And they're walking up. For what, Michigan's still running like a press or whatever, though, even though there's no way they're coming back. So if you're pressing, that means you're trying to compete. So Wisconsin's coach, and this isn't a reaction as much to Michigan still competing as it is, he's got some of his underclassmen into the bench guys, like in the game, you know, running some stuff late. And they're having some trouble getting the ball to half court because of Michigan's defense, whatever. So he called a timeout to reset the 10 seconds. And Juwan Howard got pissy about it. And so after the game, there's the handshake line, and Juwan Howard's over talking to someone, but he's staying out of the line, being an unsportsmanlike douche, as far as I'm concerned. And I guess he kind of starts to get in line or whatever, but he's talking to someone off to the side, and Coach Garb gets to him, and, you know, some people say he, like, grabbed him. I saw some stupid people on Twitter talking about, you know, accusing the Wisconsin coach of being racist, thinking he can just grab another coach. He wouldn't do that to a white coach. I'm like, whatever. He didn't really grab him. He kind of puts his hand on him, like, obviously trying to get his attention. One, because Juwan Howard's being a unsportsmanlike sack of crap. Like, You're leading young men. Be a good example. One. So now, I'm not saying that's what Guard was saying, but Guard puts his hand on him, and the video's easy to find. Just look up Juwan Howard punches Wisconsin assistant, or Juwan Howard punch, and you'll probably find it that way. And Howard gets a little upset, which, whatever, God put his hand on you, but, like, you're supposed to be shaking hands anyway. You know. And they kind of get into it, and it kind of looks like they both, like, kind of put hands on each other a little bit. And people start getting in and separating people. And Howard, eventually, as, things, they're starting to get separated, Howard kind of lunges, and he open hand swings at a Wisconsin assistant coach. I think he clips the coach, but he hits it's basically in the direction, and, like, he makes contact, open palm, with a Wisconsin assistant. Now, some people were like, that's not a punch. Like, Gary Sheffield Jr., people need to get over, da-da-da-da. And I'm sitting here like, I agree with a lot of his takes, but, like, someone goes, it's not a punch, but, it's a, let's say, a coward move. It's B-made. And Sheffield goes, now the person said it in a way like, you can concur that this is, a coward move. And he goes, concur? Y'all don't care too much. Who cares? And I'm like, to be honest, I do care. One, like, if I was a University of Michigan, like, grad, if I was a student, if I was a player, like, if I was a player on that team, I would lose respect for Howard. He should conduct himself better. Like, okay, timeout. Maybe you're like, if my guys are getting one over on you this late and the game's over, like, who cares? But once again, Coach Garb, he's taking care of his underclassmen. He's protecting him just like he would in any other situation of a game where that was going on. So, Howard swings at someone. Like, as far as I'm concerned, I don't care what your reasoning was. Like, you could say that's bad sportsmanship. I don't even think it was gamesmanship. I mean, it's piddly. Like, you swinging at someone. Like, one, you having a little titty baby cry fest, and you can't go through and be a man and shake hands. Like, your players are. They're 18, 19, 20. You're in your 40s. You spent almost 2 decades you spent like a decade as a player in the NBA, and then you spent like another decade as a glorified assistant coach on the bench getting paid way more money than you freaking deserved to do nothing but sit on the bench. I'll occasionally play a couple minutes. But he kind of like Udonis Haslem has been for like the last, honestly, like the last 10 years pretty much or so. Like, or close to it. Like, Haslem, that's been Udonis Haslem. Juwan Howard was the first one, or was the guy to do that before him. Like, and I'm trying to figure out what it is with like these 90s college stars who are now coaches. Like, can Juwan Howard and Penny Hardaway grow the hell up? Like, can they take any kind of responsibility for anything? Now, to this point, I don't know if Howard is like totally, hand-waved away or made some kind of stupid excuse, but every time anything happens with Penny Hardaway, everything's about, people are jealous of us, people's this and that. He's accused people of doing it to him because he's a black coach, even though no one trashed John Thompson or John Thompson's son, because they were class acts. They didn't do stuff like this. Penny Hardaway gets criticized because he acts in a manner that draws criticism. It's like you get hey Penny, I know you're not going to hear this cuz like I'm nobody. But people criticize you because you deserve it. People criticize you because you don't act like a grown man. You don't act like a good leader. You make excuses. You place blame on everybody except yourself. It's one thing to protect your players from blame, but you don't take blame for anything. And he jeopardized James Wiseman's development because of what he did before becoming Memphis's head coach. Now, I think it's a little bullcrap, but we all know the rules. Like, he was a AAU coach. You know, he paid to move Wiseman's family to Memphis to be a part of the AAU team. And there had been buzz for a couple years that Hardaway or that Memphis might look at Penny Hardaway. And there was a lot of buzz in the fan base. There were a lot of people who wanted Hardaway at Memphis. And he was heavily around the program. He's a booster. So then all of a sudden he becomes coach in his first, recruiting class. He's got James Wiseman. Under NCAA rules, I see how, I'm not saying I agree with the rules, but not shocked that what happened. And it's not Wiseman's fault. It's the NCAA's fault, but it's also Hardaway's fault. You know the rules. And, can we say, yeah, this stuff happened before he was coach, but, he was still a booster. If you could say, yes, it was involved in AAU, but now that he's gone to Memphis, it's so close, I'm not shocked that happened. Sorry I got off on Penny, but it's going to be interesting to see how Juwan Howard handles this, because to me, this is a situation where you acted like Penny Hardaway, you acted like a baby, and then you threw it. It's like you were throwing a tantrum. Another grown man called you out for it, who has the same job you do, and just asked you to act with some class, probably, to act like you're a head coach, to act like you've been around the game for decades, to act like, a grown man who is, a good example. And to act with some respect for your players. Because he's a reflection of his players too. He's a reflection of that program. He's the face. He's the leader of that program. You're doing a disservice representing your guys when you act like that. So I saw the press conference and he talked about what got him so heated or whatever. But I kind of took it as I'm like, here he is, he can answer why he was so upset. But to me, I listened to that press conference, and to me, I kind of felt like excuses. And I'm kind of waiting. I saw some people well, I wonder if he's going to pull a Penny and blame, or some of these other people who have, had outbursts and then blamed it on racism. I'm not going there because I haven't seen anything to say that he has or will. But those are some comments going around. Once again, don't speculate that. That's not cool. I don't think. I'm only bringing it up because I've seen it brought up in talking about the Juwan Howard thing. I really enjoy him. I don't agree with all his takes, but I do enjoy Clay Travis, one of the most entertaining people in the space. Don't put stuff out into the he knows how to drive traffic. He's run a business, so that's probably why he's doing it. But I would prefer not to just make wild speculation about that. I'd rather roast someone after the fact for actually doing it. But let's not throw this stuff out there because it just gives fuel to other people to say like, see, you're a racist. You think all black people will do this, which that's not true either. That's not what he's saying. But those responses I was seeing in the comments, it's crazy. But Juwan Howard, do better. Don't like your guys deserve better than that. Your players deserve better than that. And to be honest, if I was, and this is something like, and I get like, there's tension in competitive spaces. I am, unless there's something in contracts or something or whatever, I don't understand when stuff like this happens why players or coaches don't file assault charges. Because you know what would stop some or a lot of the stupid stuff around some of the sports? Filing an assault charge when someone swings at you or swings and hits you. Like what happened earlier this season to Nikola Jokic with Markieff Morris. You know, Morris had been kind of physical, Jokic had been kind of physical, but there was no foul called. Morris, pissed off about that, comes racing up the court and like side swipes Jokic. Now Jokic just kind of stumbles over because he's bigger, and Jokic retaliates and decks Morris. And a lot of people got more mad at Jokic. Morris assaulted him first. Like what Morris did, he came running up and he did like a kind of cross bodies the guy and kind of bounces off. But I mean, like he could have seriously hurt Jokic. I'd be pissed too. If I was Jokic, I wouldn't have retaliated. I would just, after the game, I would have filed an assault charge, because that's what that was. That wasn't a basketball play. I've seen some other instances, like you see some of these fights break out, or, I mean, heck, I'm trying to remember who it was, just straight up clocked someone during a game. Man, well, heck, what Robert Horry did to Steve Nash back in, I think it was the 06 playoffs. It was 05 or 06 playoffs, I think. Somewhere in there. Robert Horry just comes up and just two-hand just shoves Steve Nash off of his feet into the sideboards. Like, Nash's face, like, his face hits the press table, like the scorer's table. And he's like bleeding. And what ends up happening is Horry gets ejected, but Amari Stoudemire and Quentin Richardson and maybe someone else. I know two key people in the rotation, and Amari Stoudemire, their star big, and one of the arguably 10 best players in the league at that point, 15 most impactful players in the league during that period of time, gets suspended because they left the bench area. Because this is just a couple years. This is, within like a year or two of the Malice in the Palace. This might have been 06, 07. I'm trying to remember. That Sun Spurs rivalry was heated. But what Horry did was an assault. What would stop some of this stupid crap from happening is players going to the police and filing police reports like, this wasn't a basketball play. You tell me where in basketball you're allowed to run over at full speed and just two-hand shove someone into a solid object. Or just two-hand shove someone, launch them through the air. That's not in basketball. That's not a thing. You tell me where, trying to, just take someone out. Or heck, even with Draymond Green, some of his nut kicks. Like, that's assault. I know it's a little silly, and everybody's like, well, we don't want that. No, but I don't like this kind of stuff happening. I don't like altercations like this happening. So maybe if we started slapping some assault charges on people, that kind of stuff will stop. Because obviously, flag or fines, suspensions, ejections, and stuff like that haven't stopped this kind of stupid, just stuff. I was gonna say something a little more harsh there, but that will. And then I will end off the show with one final story. We have Tom Brady. Tom Brady is allegedly, a little upset with Bruce Arians. This also includes Byron Leftwich, the Buccaneers offensive coordinator. So Bruce Arians tore his Achilles, and had to spend a lot of the year rehabbing, or a lot of the season. Like, he was having to do rehab stuff during the week, and this coincided often with him, or with times where Brady and Leftwich would be game planning. And so they get a lot of their work done. And a lot of times, what the alleged reports are is they'd have maybe the entire game plan done. Like, they'd come up with some really good stuff they really liked from their film study. Boom. Arians would come in after the fact and just take red pen to sometimes everything, apparently, or just to a lot of it. He would, basically undo the work they'd done. And one of the reasons Tom Brady came to Tampa was because he wanted more of a voice. He wanted more of a say. He wanted a collaborative environment. And apparently that wasn't how things were. And Byron Leftwich is apparently upset with this too, a bit. And as I can imagine, but apparently the honeymoon period was over. And maybe some of this stuff was going on year one. Now, year one, obviously, Arians didn't have a torn Achilles. I guess, maybe everybody was together for these game planning sessions. But, if you're taking time out of, this period of time where the game planning is going on, you're rehabbing, you're doing your rehab stuff, and you just walk in, it's like, you just say, no, and start scrapping stuff. I'm like, I can see how people would get pissed off. I can understand how that would upset people, and I can understand. So Brady, deciding, you know what? Here we go again. You know what? I don't want to deal with this, and I'm probably going to deal with this everywhere. Maybe, Bill's not some kind of special tyrant. Maybe this is just how it is. So that allegedly is some of his retirement. However, Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk, the genius Mike Florio, he's coming out and he believes wholeheartedly that Tom Brady will be the starting quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers week 1. Now, remember, that's Tom's favorite team. Joe Montana's his favorite player ever. And that's interesting because, Steve Young and Joe Montana have already come out and said that, and they've stuck up for Jimmy Garoppolo, but they said, Trey Lance ain't ready. And to some degree, like, it almost seems like they're burying Trey Lance ever being good. I'm not ready to do that. I think Trey Lance is a heck of a prospect. I think he's got a great head on his shoulders. And he doesn't see, I don't think people need to trash Trey Lance to defend Jimmy G. This is this is the kind of crap that annoys me about today. Everything's trash except the things that I really like. Even good things, they're trash too. And if it doesn't align with what I think, or if I like this guy, I have to hate this guy, or if I think this guy's the greatest, this guy that other people think is greatest, he has to suck. Jimmy G's a good quarterback, but he has flaws. He has warts. And there's a reason the 49ers put all that investment into acquiring Trey Lance. They wouldn't have done that if they didn't think they could mold Trey Lance into something better than what Jimmy Garoppolo is. And Jimmy Garoppolo has been hurt a lot. A lot. So availability is a skill. And for a lot of the time for the 49ers, the reason they don't have more wins under Kyle Shanahan is because Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't stay healthy. And then he has these stretches like he'll just miss some inexplicably easy throws, like gimme throws. Desmond Ridder has that in his game. Like, they're both accurate quarterbacks until they just aren't. It's kind of wild. So, like I was saying, Florio thinks he'll be with the 49ers. I'm like, so we were talking about like Lance and a pick or, 49ers giving up Trey Lance. I'm like, well, no, I would think they'd probably trade Garoppolo. Like, I think they'd try and get Brady. They wouldn't want to get rid of Lance. I have some friends. I have some friends who are very much of the opinion that, well, I wouldn't take Jimmy Garoppolo. It would have to be Lance. And I'm like, well, I mean, to a degree, I agree with you, but, I don't know how much trade value Brady would have because I think he's got 1 year left on his contract. I don't know how much guaranteed money's on that, whatever. And it seemed like it was an easily voidable year anyway, or whatever. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. I'm not convinced Brady comes out of retirement. I'm not, but it wouldn't shock me either. Because I just don't see Brady as like the Favre type to like waffle back and forth. I think he made his decision. He made his decision. Now maybe I'm wrong. And Brady didn't look washed this year. I kind of said going into like the Bucs thing, I'm like, I'm not convinced Brady isn't washed. Early in the season, he looked kind of up and down in 2020. And a lot of his numbers right now are a lot of it's volume. Like there's some things where like, and here's another thing about Tom Brady that a lot of people don't or haven't paid attention to. His inaccurate throw percentage is actually a lot higher than you would think. Like, he has a really good completion percentage, and he makes amazing decisions with the football. For the most part. But if his inaccurate throw percentage was lower or closer to, your average quarterback or closer to most elite quarterbacks, his completion percentage would be like the stuff of legend. So, because like Josh Allen's rookie year, Brady was and Josh Allen were around the same area in like inaccurate throw percentage. It was like them and like Sam Darnold, if you can believe that. So, which that would have been his last year in was that his last year in New England? Or his second to last? Or second to last? That 2019. Yeah, that would have been 2019. Well, 2019, that would have been Josh Allen's second year. That might have been second. No, I'm pretty sure that was 2018 that I was thinking of, but it might have been 2019. I'd have to look. Anyway, one of those years that is a correct stat. I promise you. Because I got it from PFF. Even though I kind of have a love-hate, maybe hate-love relationship with Pro Football Focus. Anyway, that would be interesting to see. If I'm the 49ers, like, I'm looking to get rid of Garoppolo. this offseason, see what kind of value I can get for him, and I'm just going to go on with Lance and see what I've got. I know they've got like a really good team, and they got to the NFC Championship game, and they kind of, I think it was like they kind of had a rough start to the year. Maybe they're better than their record, but I think as long as I don't. It seems like Garoppolo is slipping. It doesn't seem like he's stabilizing as not the best version of Garoppolo we've seen with the 49ers. I would just turn it over to Lance and give him a full offseason with it. And I'd get a quality backup. Like, I'd bring Nick Mullins back. Nick Mullins knows your offense. He's been up and down in it, but Mullins is a pretty good backup. Or I'd find someone else who maybe has been a backup in a similar system. You look at, or someone who maybe could fit well in a system like that. I'm thinking, to be honest, like, I don't know what his current contract is like or if he's a free agent, but Case Keenum would be an interesting guy to put in that offense as a backup. Maybe, depending on if he gets cut or not, a guy like Drew Lock could be interesting because of his physical tools. Because he would have comparable arm talent to Lance, and he's more athletic and more mobile than people gave him credit for coming out. But I will say this: if Brady is the quarterback for the Niners to start next season, that would be wild. It'd be very interesting to see like how that happens, and if that means Trey Lance is there or not. That definitely would mean that they had ditched Jimmy G. But I'm not counting on. I don't think that's going to happen. Because if Brady's kind of on the fence right now about playing, like if he's not 100% committed to playing, we saw it with Brett Favre when he finally did actually retire and then come out with the Jets. He had like a pretty good season till he took a hit, got dinged up, and the Jets fell off a cliff. And then he had that great year the next year with the Vikings. And then he hung on for one more season, and it was just a train. I mean, it was just bad. And he was younger in all those seasons than Brady has been the last 3, I think. Or kind of like, I mean, that was age 39, 40, 41 Favre, I think that I'm talking about. We're talking about Brady in his mid-40s now. So, but then again, Vinny Testaverde had one of, I think, the best stretches of play of his career at age 45, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was the Carolina Panthers. So, who knows? With that being said, we will get into a bunch of quarterback stuff tomorrow. NFL draft wise and just the QB market in general. And that'll probably be 3 o'clock tomorrow, I would say. I'm going to experiment with this time. There might be some days where I do multiple streams, or I might change the time around. I'm going to be experimenting, and some of these extra shows, like if I'm doing multiple shows, it might be because that's when I can line up a guest to have on to talk about different things, because I have some friends who are as passionate as me about some football and other sports as well. And I would like to just have other voices on the channel. I'd like to have some more conversational stuff because I feel like that's more interesting than just listening to me talk for 2 hours. Which, you know, in the future, I'm definitely gonna have to get back into the mode of paying attention to chat, and I'd love to answer questions. Like, if you're listening to this after the fact, or have just been, you know, listening, because I'm not watching viewer numbers because I don't want to get distracted by that. If you like the show, or if you want to hear about certain topics, it's not like there's a bunch of people around here. You're gonna be right there in the or the feed's not like rushing by. I will eventually see it, and I will interact. I will answer questions, and that's fun. Like, I would love to have a conversation in the community, and hopefully maybe in the future, depending on where this goes, I might invest in doing some stuff that allows y'all's voices to be heard even more. So, if you like, and sorry, I don't always focus on the camera. I tend to also kind of keep an eye on my stuff because it's also weird. I don't want to just bore a hole into your souls. Um, but anyway, that's the show for today. I will be back 3 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you, and I hope you have a blessed rest of your evening.